Ask just about anyone who races ski mountaineering locally, and they'll tell you the Europeans are the cream of the crop for that high alpine sport. Earlier this month, a dozen Summit County locals, including 8 youth athletes, traveled to Switzerland for the World Ski Mountaineering Championships to test their mettle against the originators of the sport. Young Grace Staberg, a 17-year-old junior at Summit High School, finished better than anyone, with top 10 finishes in every race she entered. We talked with Grace to learn more about her first experience with international competition and what she sees for the future of skimo in Summit. You just got back from Skimo Worlds. You've been in town less than 24 hours. How's it feel to be back home?
It's a little bit bittersweet. We were definitely getting a bit homesick being gone for so long, but also already missed Switzerland. There was some amazing skiing. It was super warm and lots of croissants, so definitely miss those.
Great food, I'm sure. First time to Switzerland?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, first time.
Now tell me, when it came time to, when you were planning on going to Worlds and all that good stuff, what did you start doing to train? How did you start getting prepared for this first trip out to Ski Mountaineering Worlds?
I ramped my training up a little bit, and I started training my technical skills a bit more, so I spent a lot of time on transitions and downhill skiing, but I definitely think I could have adjusted my training more because it was so flat in Europe, and I really was not prepared for that.
Okay. Were you expecting some constant uphill, constant elevation changes all over the place, almost like what you get here in Summit?
Yeah, I think we all thought that the racing itself would be pretty much the same as here, even if the competition would be different, but didn't really end up that way.
Interesting. So, like you said, you changed a little bit of what you were skiing. What would you say is probably your biggest strength on skis?
I think I'm really strong on sustained steep pitches and keeping my endurance up. I tend to struggle a bit more with speed, but the more power-oriented areas like the super steep pitches and endurance space tend to be where I'm strongest.
All right, great. Now, as you were, again, preparing here in Summit, what was going through your mind as far as just the experience goes? So, you one part of your mind was working on training and working on getting ready for, being an athlete out there. What else was going through your mind about, the chance to go out to Switzerland, the chance to compete with international skiers that you'd never seen before in your life?
I was really excited. I planned to take it more as a learning opportunity and just learn as much as I could so that when I go back next time I can really be competitive. So I was excited for sure, and I also was super nervous just because everyone in the U.S. knows how fast the Europeans are, and we were all just waiting to see how much we'd get kicked to the curb.
And when it came time to it, did you guys, were they really blowing you away as much as maybe you expected, or was the competition a little more even?
I definitely think that I was more competitive than I thought I would be. I thought I would be pretty near the back, but I ended up pretty close to the podium in each of my races. And I was pleasantly surprised because it makes it seem like you're closer to being truly competitive. So, yeah, I think they weren't quite as fast as I had imagined, but they're definitely still amazing skiers.
Yeah. Well, and that was probably what I noticed the most as we were, taking a look at the results every time. We were following you guys right here in Summit, of course, and I noticed that your name kept popping up in those top 10s over and over and over again. What was your goal before you went out there? Was your goal top 10, top 15? What did you set for yourself as far as, race finishes?
I didn't actually have any finish goals or time goals. I mostly just wanted to leave it all out there and learn from the experience and come back to the U.S. with things I can improve for next time. But I think had I known that I was going to place in the top 10, I definitely would have had more goals going into it, and I would have been more performance oriented.
Okay, great. Do you think that maybe you performed a little bit better because you maybe weren't too goal oriented? Maybe that you were just going in there expecting whatever came, and then all of a sudden things started going your way?
Yeah, I think maybe a bit, especially because I wasn't really stressed and I was just enjoying myself and leaving it all out there. But I also think if I would have known that I could have placed that high, I would have probably trained even a bit harder before I left. But always learning.
Yeah, constantly learning. How long have you been racing ski mountaineering?
This is only my second year, actually. I got into it in October of last year.
Okay. What got you into the sport in the first place? What about it sounded like fun compared to anything else you could be doing on the snow?
I had been on the Team Summit Big Mountain team, and I really loved it, but I especially loved whenever we would do hike to terrain, and I already knew how much I loved running. So when I heard about the skimo team that Joe Howdy Show was creating through Summit Endurance Academy, it just seemed like a really good experience to combine skiing and endurance sports.
Yeah, very cool. And did you fall in love right away, or was it kind of a little steep learning curve?
At the very beginning, it was really painful. I definitely didn't love it at first. Intervals when you're completely out of shape and don't know how to do a sport are pretty terrible, but I'd say within the first few months, I really started to love it and was glad I had stuck with it.
Okay. So your background was actually a little bit more big mountain than it was cross country. What was it like then to work on the endurance? Like you said, you were a big runner. How did endurance on skis differ from, maybe trail running or road running?
I think with skimo, personally, to me, it seems like it's heavily based on muscular endurance and somewhat cardiovascular endurance, but you have to be really strong as well, which I didn't experience quite as much with running, so that was definitely a switch for me.
Cool. Great. Now, when you finally got out to Switzerland and got a chance to get in the groove, what did you enjoy the most about being there in a different country? What did you like about Switzerland? Like you said already, croissants, of course, the food.
Of course. I think I just really enjoyed the community and how into it everyone was. There were so many people spectating at races, and you would see kids just out touring, having fun, and people who weren't related to any racers came to watch the races. I just thought it was amazing to see how supportive the skimo community is there and how much bigger uphill is in Europe. And I think that's really something we can strive for here as well.
Yeah. Do you feel as though that, Summit County is maybe moving in that direction where ski mountaineering is, first of all, people understand what it is now, and maybe it's gaining a little bit of popularity and traction with especially kids like yourself who are a little younger?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a very fast-growing sport right now. The resorts themselves, I think, are becoming more open to uphill, which allows more people to get into it. And the youth program has just exploded this year. And I think we can hope that that continues and that we can pull more youth into the sport and help grow it from the bottom.
Yeah, and of course, Summit County, you guys had the biggest contingent out of anybody who was heading out there for the U.S. team. Tell me about training and working with the rest of the folks on your team. What did you like about, having a lot of familiar faces around you at each of these races?
It was really nice going into Worlds because while we were there, even though the racing was unfamiliar and the Europeans were a bit intimidating, there were so many people that we knew, and you just really felt like you had people in your corner and people there to support you, which I think was amazing.
Cool. And that probably helped when it came time to actually get down to the nitty-gritty of, after the race, recovering and preparing for the next one, and maybe didn't feel quite as alone as you might have if you just were out there with 2-3 people that you knew. Yeah,
it was really nice after races to go ski or hang out or just relax with other people you knew. It really took some of the stress out of the situation.
Cool. Great. And then when it came to your races, what races really stand out in your mind, or what moments from your events will be sticking with you, heading into the next couple seasons?
I think the individual race really was a reflective moment for me because I was so nervous about the boot pack up the couloir, and I ended up loving it. And it was more adventurous than any skimo racing I've done in the United States. So I think it just really reminded me that in order to continue to be competitive, I need to work more on stepping outside of my comfort zone and getting into that more technical stuff. And just enjoying it. I mean, that was amazing and beautiful. So
yeah. And did you have fun while you were out there? Like you said, seeing some of this stuff that you just don't see around Colorado.
For sure. I absolutely loved it, and I was pretty sad when we had to come back because it's just such an amazing country. And the mountains there are just so different than anything we have here that it was cool to get to experience that. Anything
that threw a curveball at you, anything that, like you said, that couloir, you were a little nervous, but then you got on it and you were having a blast on it. Anything else that you weren't quite expecting once you got out on any of the courses?
Yeah, I think I had a really hard time with the vertical race because they tend to be my strongest races because they're based on fitness and you don't really have to have as many technical skills. And I thought that I would be able to be more competitive in that race. But it ended up being more a Nordic style race because of how flat it was. And I was not prepared for that. So that really threw me a curveball. And I ended up being disappointed in my finish that day. But gives me something to work on in the future.
Yeah, when you say it was a little bit flatter, did that mean that maybe that Nordic technique was coming in a little handier than you would have expected?
Yeah, I mean, I think with all the Europeans, they're so good at gliding, and since I never did Nordic, I really don't have that technical base, and so I ended up running on my skis for most of the time, but it's really just not as efficient. Okay. So I just felt really behind in my skills on that portion.
Okay, great. And finally, where do you hope that you will be going in the future with the sport of skimo? Is it the sort of thing that you want to stick with, now and far into the future?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would love to stick with it. I think this was really just the beginning for me. And next year, I would love to make it to Youth Olympic Games and then do some other World Cup races in Europe. And eventually, I'd like to be able to be competitive in World Cup races and make it to the Olympics for the U.S. So, yeah.
Which, of course, is soon to be on the horizon. Skimo is gaining some traction. I can't remember. Is it officially going to be an Olympic sport yet, or is it still kind of in the works? I
don't know if it's been officially decided, but all of the possible host cities for the 2026 Winter Games have had World Cups and have strong communities. So I think it's fairly certain that it'll be added in 2026.
Very cool. And when you think about the possibility of, maybe even going to the Olympics or even doing those World Cup races, what do you think needs to be done, come summertime, come next winter? What's going to be the most important thing for you as you keep on moving towards those bigger, better, grander goals?
I think the first thing for me is just making sure I keep having fun with it and keep mixing backcountry touring and other more adventurous days in there so that I don't burn out. And also I think I've realized that I might need to specialize a bit more and maybe not focus quite as much on shorter distance running and fast racing in the summer and focus more on continuing to trail run and mountain run and do vertical Ks and things like that in the summer just to prepare myself year round.
Okay, great. Basically taking what you would be doing on the snow and transferring it to that kind of cross training that year round on the dirt, on the snow, wherever it takes you.
Yeah.
Sticking with it. Fantastic. And finally, if there are any kids out there, because like we said, this is a growing sport. It's the sort of thing that's especially gaining traction here in Summit County. What would you say to any young kids out there who might be looking at skimo or might be looking at you guys who went out there and thinking, I want to do that. I want to go to Switzerland. I want to race against the best of the best.
Well, skimo can just be so much fun. You can get to places you couldn't get to lift served. And I've found so many great opportunities for travel and meeting new people through the sport. And just even further than that, I think the feeling of satisfaction you get from having self-powered adventure is unlike anything else.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are starting to discover that, especially as our local ski resorts seem to be getting more crammed and more crammed and more crammed.
For sure.
Absolutely. Well, Grace, thank you again for making time to come in, and congratulations on your finishes. Remind us again how you finished in each of your races. How many races did you do, and where'd you place?
I did 4 races. I finished 9th in the sprint and relay and 6th in the vertical and individual.
Well, congratulations again. You killed it out there, and so did everybody else from Summit. It was a lot of fun to be following you guys from right here in Summit, cheering you on.
Thank you.
Of course, Grace Staberg talking skimo, and of course, hopefully, the future of Olympic skimo here in Summit on Krystal 93.